Hello, my name is Dr. Frank A. Thomas, and I am excited to present to you another version of the African American Legacy Preaching Series. It's our honor and our privilege to share with you the very best of preachers, and particularly African American preachers, and we just open up and talk preaching. And so today, my very special guest is Pastor Reginald Sharpe, the pastor of the Fellowship Church of Chicago, the SHIP, everybody knows it as. So we're just excited to have you here for this conversation, and thank you for being here. It's exciting to me to have you here.
No, thank you. I'm really honored to be here. I'm grateful.
Well, thank you. Let's get in it, because I know our viewers want to hear about you and hear from you. So tell me about your call.
Okay. My call. Well, if my mother was here and my grandmothers were here, they would tell you I had a Jeremiah call from the womb. Ironically, my mother would say I would be still all week in her womb until she went to church on Sunday. She said it would be like I was in there jumping in her womb, the music and the energy of the church. I think that's ironic. And then at the age of 2 and 3, I would come home and mimic my pastor. So I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, Lithonia, Georgia, and Decatur right next door to each other on the east side of Atlanta. So the Greater Travelers Rest Baptist Church is my home church. Reverend H.F. Shepherd had an afro, tall, about 6'3", 6'4". I wanted to be just like him. So some of my earlier clips of preaching, there's a fro because I wanted to be like Reverend Shepherd. But when I was 2 and 3 and 4 years old, I would come home and mimic everything I saw at church. I would pull the trash can out, put a towel over the trash can, set my little plastic chairs up in the kitchen or on the fireplace. I would set up church and play church. So I was known as the little kid that would play church. I didn't know then how much the Lord was really molding me and preparing me for where I was headed. And so some older lady told my mother, watch him. And if this continues till around the age of 12 or 13, then you might have something special. Right now, he's a kid. That's what kids do. They lock in on something and they mimic it. They have fun. So around 12 or 13, I really began to feel this yearning to do more in ministry. I was very, very close with my youth pastor. We called him Reverend Buddy, but his name is Norman Thomas. He took a lot of time with me, and I talked to my pastor. And I was very nervous around the age of 13 or 14. I said, what if I told you, my pastor this time is Dr. E. Dewey Smith. Reverend Shepherd has retired, 03. Pastor Smith has come December 03. So now I'm about 12, 13 years old, and I went to him and said, what if I were to tell you that possibly, maybe, could be that I might happen to feel that I think I might be called to preach. It was all of that. And he just smiled. He said, well, I would get you involved in the ministerial program. And he gave me some details of what that would look like. Well, long story short, my first sermon ended up being April 12th, 2006, but it wasn't at a church. It was on a Wednesday morning at my high school, MLK High School there in Lithonia, Georgia. There was a ministry called FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. The football players came there, the band members came there, basketball players, and so Coach Bird, Diane Bird, a black woman, told me that I was gonna bring the message that day. And I mean told me. I was like, no, I don't think. She said, no, you'll be fine, just 5-6 minutes. And sure enough, I stood up and preached April 12th, 2006, and this year makes my 17th year preaching. And that date is special for me because it did not happen in a church. And I started preaching there. Students will go out and tell their parents. Reggie Sharpe is a young minister at school that does Bible study in the morning. So my first invitations came from students going to tell their grandparents and their pastors, there's this kid at my school that preaches to us and he's good. And so that's how my ministry took off. My pastor was even shocked. And he was like, well, obviously the Lord's hand is on your life. You were going to preach, but you were being invited. And so he knew it, he saw it. I was called preacher man all my life as a little kid. So I started preaching at 15 years old.
Wow.
I don't know if I'm answering that question, but you know.
Yeah, there is no right answer. There is what you're given to say.
Yeah.
So tell me about then the preparation and the educational process that followed the announcing of the call.
So the kind of church I grew up in, I knew I had to go to college. Like they celebrated graduates. High school graduations were celebrated at my church. College graduations were celebrated. AKAs and Omegas and Alphas and, you know, education was the route.
Right.
And so I remember when Reverend Shepherd was literally transitioning with a cancer that wasn't going to be cured, I went to visit him a few weeks before he passed. And this is April 2006. He dies in May 06. Right. Ironically, let me just say, when I was 10 or 11, he tells me, I pray that the Lord will let me stay around long enough to see what you will become. I preached my first sermon, April 12th, 06. He dies May 30th, 06. Wow. Symmetry. It's like the Lord almost answered his prayer. He stayed around to hear that I had started preaching. Yeah. When I went to visit him, his wife, Miss Ivory Collins Shepherd, looked at me when she caught me staring at him, trying to comprehend how his body had changed. She looked at me as a freshman in high school and said, so where are you going to college? Where do you want to go to college? And I looked and I said, I really want to go to Morehouse College. She said, oh, that's wonderful. And what are you going to study? I'm a freshman in high school, and she's already planting seeds like, and what are you going to study at Morehouse? Right. And I said, theology. Reverend Shepherd spoke up from his dying bed and said, religion and philosophy. And I said, okay, well, I'll be studying religion and philosophy. Right. And when I got to Morehouse and we had to declare our major, oh, the moment when I had to sign that paper and his booming voice, I could hear it saying religion and philosophy. So it was instilled in me. I had to go to seminary. When I was in 5th grade, my teacher, Miss Adams at Brownsmill Elementary, made us, I think it was a busy work assignment. I've since told her I thought it was. I thought it was busy work. She made us write a paper. What do I want to be when I grow up? My mother, my aunts kept a copy. Because on that paper in 5th grade, I said, I want to go to Morehouse College. I want to go to ITC. A list of things. I wrote what I wanted my wife to look like. I wrote what I wanted to be, a pastor. I wrote the name of the church, the Greater Gospel Baptist Church. I wrote out the choirs that I was going to, I mean, I was a weird kid. So in 5th grade, as a freshman in high school, my mind was always set, I had to go to school. I wanted to be a preacher that had studied, that had prepared. My pastors had done that. Reverend Shepherd had gone to school. Dr. E. Dewey Smith comes and, oh my Lord, one of the great voices of our time. Yeah. And he went to Morehouse and he went to seminary. So I wanted to do that, and it was a commitment. So I went on to Morehouse. After Morehouse, I received a full ride to Yale Divinity School. I ended up withdrawing from that program. The irony there was I had a full ride to Yale Divinity School. I don't think I was ready for that season. Leaving the South for the first time, Yale, Connecticut, that's a different kind of cold, climate and cultural. It's a different kind of cold I wasn't used to. It was a culture shock for me. And so I walked away from that program and transferred over to Vanderbilt. I finished my first master's there. Okay. And then I went back to Emory to complete my second master's at Candler School of Theology in 2018, because there was this program called the African American Preaching Program and Sacred Rhetoric up in Indianapolis that I'd already read the requirements to apply. So you either had to have an MDiv or the equivalent. Right. So with that in mind, I went back to get the equivalent. That's why I went to get that second master's, because my first master's was just a 2-year degree. And now I am in the PhD program. I didn't
know that. So that must have meant you looked at the first cohort and then began to plan.
Yes, I knew. I knew when you offered it the first time, I was discerning which doctoral program or PhD program I wanted to be a part of. And so everywhere I looked, whether it was the one at Chicago Theological Seminary, whether it was Howard Divinity School, whether it was, the program that you are the director of, everybody kept saying that you need an MDiv or the equivalent. Right. So my journey was shortened at Vanderbilt because I was pastoring. I was the campus pastor in Macon, Georgia. My whole time that I was a student, really, 90% of the time I was a student at Vanderbilt Divinity School. So I was flying back every weekend. Right. And so I said, I can't do this and finish a 3-year degree. So I said, let me just get this MTS. Let me get this Master of Theological Studies degree. Right. It's shorter, and I can live, and I can survive this if I go on and make this a little shorter. And I promised myself I would go back and finish that second master so that I could apply to a program like the one that you have.
I'm honored. I am honored. So, let's stop here for a minute and say, so, people, the question would be, with all that has happened to you relative to your preaching, the exposure, just the blessings of it, why would you need a PhD? Might be a question that the average person might ask.
Well, the best way I can answer it is Pastor Darrell Hall came to my church for Holy Week. He was our 6 a.m. preacher Monday through Thursday. And one day he said, I just pray that your highest dream of ministry comes to pass because you've helped so many others achieve some of their highest dreams of ministry already. And he said, I don't know what your highest dream of ministry is. And I became emotional because when I thought about it, my highest dream of ministry is to prepare the generation behind me. If I can help preachers avoid some of the challenges that I've had as a younger preacher, the internal struggles, the feeling of being insufficient or inadequate. If I could just equip them internally, help the next generation find the internal equilibrium and the mental and the emotional stamina for what the weight of this call is, I would have achieved my highest goal of ministry. The PhD will help me do that. Right. It will open doors and allow my voice to be heard in spaces that otherwise I may be dismissed. Yeah. I could have settled. I could have said, I'm 32 on this day, and God has blessed me to sit in rooms that some people will never sit in. I've been able to preach on platforms and conferences that some preachers will never go to. And I'm just 32. Right. And I could be satisfied with that. Yeah. But I want to be academically prepared. I want to be mentally, emotionally, internally prepared to pour back into the next generation. So as much as I love preaching, it'll be shocking to people to know that I actually enjoy teaching more. That's right. I love teaching. I like classroom spaces where people can push back and I can engage. And I can say things that the church isn't ready for because you do know there's a difference between seminary and sanctuary. Right. And so we can prod each other and challenge each other in a different way in the seminary that sometimes you have to be a little more intentional about in the sanctuary. So I'm coming alive, although I'm dying at the same time, trying to get through this program, but I'm enjoying it.
So give me a second or two, a comment relative to how has the program helped your preaching? Because you've been preaching like you've been preaching before you enrolled in the program. So people say, well, how has it helped your preaching?
It has affirmed my preaching. So a lot of what African-American preaching is, it's innate. It's not a lot of language to describe what's happening. So the program gave me the language to say, oh, that was a rhetorical move. Oh, that's why the house went up. It was that repetition. It was that litany. It was the usage of the same word over and over again that, people, something happened. There's a happening in preaching that sometimes you can't easily articulate. And so it affirmed me. And whereas I used to walk in predominantly white spaces, or like, for instance, I went to a Lutheran seminary for MLK Day, and the old Sharpe PhD program, would have walked in and said, well, let me, lower my voice and let me not be extra today and let me, just give them a little taste. Well, the program made me say, no, it's no need to turn off or turn on or turn down. You walk in the fullness of who you are. And there's brilliance in what we do. There is beauty in what we do. There is Holy Ghost in what we do. There is mastery in what we do, in the fullness of that. Even if I did start hooping, even if I did get a little loud and emotive and less restrained and less reserved, all of that is a part of the beauty of black preaching.
Yes, it is.
And what I don't like is when people try to subtly imply or suggest that our preaching is beneath other cultural styles of preaching, because that is more, didactical and that is more acceptable. No, I walk into the fullness of who I am now because of this program, my reading, my studying. The rhetoric side has actually been more helpful to me than even some of the homiletical side, because I've been able to ground myself and say, oh, that's why black preachers do this, and not just, oh, he got happy, or oh, they're loud, or oh, they're demonstrative. No, there's something happening here that I can articulate now. Right. So I'm grateful for the program.
Well, thank you. We're grateful to have you. Tell me about preaching mentors.
Well, the first preaching mentor that I would have to acknowledge is Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr. I think what makes him special is that he blends head and heart, soul and spirit, the academy and the sanctuary in a way that is also upholding a legacy of African-American preaching. It's a both and, it's not an either or.
Right.
You can have the spirit and have all of your senses and faculties working. You can have your mind and have some charismatic movement going on at the same time. So he's full of the Holy Spirit when he's preaching, but he's quoting Reinhold Niebuhr and he's quoting Tillich, and he's the first person I heard mention the teleological suspension of the ethical. I didn't know what that was, but it sure sounded good to me. And I said, oh, wow, he is really read. And so later on at Yale, I learned what that was. Right. But he's dropping that kind of weight, those kinds of quotes, and extrapolating on those kinds of concepts. But at the same time, he's throwing a rap song. He's throwing some hip hop images. He did a whole series in 2005 called Theology and Culture for the whole summer. So he's preaching Trapped in the Closet. R. Kelly's song at that time was out, and R. Kelly was a little more culturally acceptable at that time. He's preaching TV shows and preaching song lyrics. And so I watched how he blended, and so for the person that was a little more heady, he would grab you. But for the person who just needed to feel with their hearts, he would grab you as well. And so I was greatly influenced. And so for me to even be studying eulogies in my program, to me, he's one of the greatest eulogists I've ever heard. The way he personalizes a eulogy. I learned how to do eulogies well watching him. Another person that was never ordained to be a preacher is Ms. Ivory Collins Shepherd, my first lady, Reverend Shepherd's wife. He passed in 2006. She's still alive. And as a young preacher coming up in high school, young preacher coming up at Morehouse, her lessons of oratory greatly impacted how I showed up in the pulpit. She taught me stuff like this. When you get up there, she was the sweetest lady, intelligent, one of the first to graduate Gammon Theological, first black women to graduate Gammon Theological from ITC down in Atlanta in the 50s. I don't know if you're familiar with Bishop Cornelius Henderson. I think he's a UMC bishop, black guy. Well, that was her classmate. There are buildings named after him down at Clark, Atlanta. So she taught me, when you walk to the pulpit, smile and let them know you're glad. to be there. When you move your notes, don't flip a page, just ease it. You don't want the people to see how many times you're flipping. Because if they keep saying you flip the page, they're going to start counting how many pages you're flipping, and they're going to get nervous that this is about to be longer than they anticipated. She said, so don't flip a page, you slide a page. One day I used a word that was, kind of beneath. It was an inappropriate word in the pulpit. So she called me, oh, your sermon was excellent. I just enjoyed it. It was explosive today. She said, but you used this word that I wanted to talk to you about. And this is how she checked me. She said, your lexicon is too extensive to be regulated to a word like that. I mean, what can you say but, yes, ma'am. And she said, and not only that, there are people old enough in this congregation to be your grandmothers and great grandmothers. And they may not understand such a polished young man using a word of that magnitude.
Right.
She checked me. Right. And so literally my oratorical skills were shapen by her. She taught me what a litany was. She would do a run. She would help me with some of my speeches. You're walking in the authenticity of Reverend Jesse Jackson. You're walking into the beauty of Rosa Parks. You're walking into the brilliance of Dr. She was doing that, helping me write speeches and prepare sermons. I would call her. And I don't think she was never ordained, but God knows God used her to help me with some of my oratorical practices that I still use and teach to this day. So it's amazing that some of my influences weren't even preachers. Another influence has been Reverend Jerry Black down in Decatur, Georgia, Beulah Baptist Church. I grew up watching him. You don't get more illustrative or demonstrative in the pulpit than Reverend Jerry Black. He preaches with his whole body. I mean, he's the preacher, some of you that may be listening have heard of A Trip to Job's House, where he takes you through a narrative journey of what it was like to go visit Job's house when he was sick. So he has you driving down the road, shows you when the sign of Uz is, the sign for Uz, the exit for Uz is up ahead. And he's giving you instructions, turn right and go due east. And you drive this many miles, and when you get there, grab a handkerchief, because the odor of his illness is going to meet you. And he said, and it may make you repulse. He said, it may be repulsive. You may begin to gag a little because the smell from the boils. You haven't even gotten in the house yet, but he is showing you, he's doing the best of black preaching. And so he paints the picture of what it was to go to Job's house. And that's just one sermon, but Pastor Jerry Black not only is a masterful narrative preacher who is able to paint the picture, but just his embodiment, I just love it. He wears a robe every Sunday he's preaching mostly. And he's gonna show you. If Peter's walking on the water, he's about to show you in the pulpit what it literally looks like. Can you imagine being out there on the liquidity of the water? And he's just gonna give it to you. I'm mesmerized by him, and not just his preaching, but his person. He's a great person as well. So I would say, Pastor Jerry, if you cut me open on a normal Sunday morning, Reverend Shepherd will spill out. He taught me more pastoral. I was too young to listen to him preach. But I did know from Reverend Shepherd he was going to close with early Sunday morning every time. Oh, I don't care what he was talking about, but at the end of that sermon, he died. And then he's going to ask you, didn't he die? And then he's going to tell you what happened while he was dying. The earth reeled and rocked and stumbled like a drunken man, and the moon dripped in blood, and midday became midnight. He died unto the centurion soldier. So I learned, like, okay, that's something right there, because the church would stand up around that time. They might have been asleep for the first 40 minutes, but as soon as Reverend Shepherd would say he died, everybody, oh yes he did. So I learned pastoral, I learned what it means to be a pastor from Reverend Shepherd. Reverend Smith's brilliance in the preaching moment really impacted my life. Miss Shepherd taught me oratory. Reverend Black just taught me it's all right to let the Spirit take over. And it's a good thing. And I could go down a list. One other one that really influenced me that I never met, too. Reverend Gardner Taylor. Never met him, but I've read him. And Reverend William Sloan Coffin. They have been my private tutorers. even though they have escaped this time capsule called flesh and stepped over into eternity, they're with me. Yeah. William Sloane Coffin, Reverend Gardner, Calvin Taylor. Yeah. So I don't preach Easter or Christmas without reading what they said about Christmas or Easter. I'm giving some secrets out here, so it's going to be some people buying some books. Yeah. But I don't go to the pulpit around those high holy days without reading what they said about it.
Yeah. You mentioned your dissertation, so talk a little bit about that, because I'd like folk to know what you're studying.
So I'm honing in on what is the rhetoric of hope in African American eulogies. I'm really amazed. So there's some intersections at my project. Process theology is showing up, homiletics is showing up, rhetoric is showing up, and really the problem of evil, theodicy. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of intersections. And at a funeral, all of them are intersecting. People have questions, especially like the one I did a few days ago. A young man dies in a tragic car accident, 25 years old, with a 2-month-old baby. Mm-hmm. His mother and his sisters are sitting there, and the baby's mother's sitting there, and they're like, and verbalizing, I have questions for God. Yeah. And now the eulogist has to stand up in the midst of a tragedy and be responsible enough to help be a spokeswoman or spokesman for God, an interpreter for God in this moment of pain. And if a eulogy goes well, like we know with Uncle Wash from They Like to Never Quit Praising God, literally the title of your book came from a response listening to a eulogy. Yes. What happened in that moment that a church at a death like that, they like to never quit praising God? I want to study what happened and what happens in eulogies that lead people to a point of hope, a point of praise, a point of being able to find the will to live past these very, devastating tragedies. And so that's what I'm studying, and we're gonna see how it goes. I'm in it. I'm in the thick of it, and every week. So the beauty of this kind of project is every week it happens. Right. We see death happen. We see funerals happen, especially notable figures like a Tyree Nichols. So I can definitely look at what Reverend Al Sharpton said. Yep. I can look at some eulogies of some celebrities that have passed. But really, if I didn't put a boundary on it, I'll be studying eulogies from the beginning of time all the way to now. So I'm really interested in the civil rights movement. We see a lot of deaths happening, and we see a lot of preachers having to mount the pulpit to restore the communal hope that was waning. And so I'm almost to the point where I'm about to find the eulogy of Jimmy Lee Jackson. I've traced where the church is.
Yeah, see that scholarship.
And I'm trying to find it. Yeah. I want to know who did the eulogy for Emmett Till in Chicago. Yeah, that's it. And so I've traced the church, but it's like, who did it? Right. Is there a recording of it? So I'm really on a rabbit hunt.
Well, I'm excited about it because I'm your advisor, so I get to I get to read the fruit of your rabbit hunt. Yeah. And it's an exciting project, and I think it's really going to bless a whole lot of people. I
pray so. Yeah. I just want us to do better, because that moment is so sensitive.
It is.
People's faith literally hangs in the balance, and we've seen it go wrong.
Yep, we have seen it go wrong.
We've seen eulogies go wrong.
And we've seen it go right. And we've seen it go right.
And we've seen it go right. And when it goes right,
it's nothing like it.
It's nothing like it. It's like a breath of fresh air.
It is.
To see somebody take that moment and honor that person's life well and point us to heaven. I think it was Dr. Proctor who said sometimes you have to preach on a tilt. And in no greater moment than a eulogy do we need to preach on a tilt to help look heavenward.
I'm going to go down this hole, but I'll just say this. One of the most profound moments that has led to my call in my preaching is Reverend L.K. Curry in Chicago. One of I was a sophomore in college, and in the neighborhood, one of the guys was killed. It was a botched Tom McCann's shoe store robbery. And I was a distraught whole section of the whole community. And when Reverend L.K. Curry got done, how did he do that? I was hopeless or down, but I was hope. So I affirm that it's just the genius of that moment changes lives.
Right, it does.
Even calls people.
Wow.
You know, because that's how I got so interested in how did he do that?
Yeah.
Not just, I know it was God, I know it was the Holy Spirit, but also how did he
do that?
How did he do that? And so that's how.
Do you remember anything he said that stood out?
Just how I felt. I don't remember anything he said.
Wow.
And I was not knowing that I was going to preach. I wasn't doing preaching. You know, I was a part of the campus ministry at school. I'd go to worship. They were trying to get me to go to seminary. I had no sense of that. I'm just here to, so I wasn't thinking like that. I wasn't thinking like, what is he doing? Or no, but when he got through.
You felt something.
I felt something, it changed. And so part of my, this whole piece, you picked it up, rhetoric and theology, and it was his theology, but also his rhetoric, and to try to name exactly what you're talking about. Yes. What happened in that moment, because it changed my life.
Yeah, it's something.
Yes.
But I've had ladies walk up to me, older ladies, when I was a younger preacher, and it wasn't until I got a little older I respected it and understood it. They would say, "Baby, I felt you today."
Right.
And I would say, "No, I don't want to be felt. I want to be heard."
That's right.
You don't get to tell people how to experience the gospel. Some days they don't need to hear it.
Right.
They need to feel it.
Right.
And that is the brilliance and really the magic I would use. I hate to use that word. It's mystical. It's beyond us.
Yeah, spiritual is a word. It's beyond us. It's from transcendent. It's from another world.
Absolutely.
That comes into our reality, you know, to change it. So let's talk about Hampton.
Oh, Lord.
So, you know, I'll let you say whatever you want to say. I'll just tell me about the preaching at the Hampton Ministers and Choir Directors Conference.
Well, you know that Hampton is its own special experience. For me, that experience was exacerbated because I was invited November 2019. I was so shocked that they invited me to be the morning preacher that I literally found Dr. Deborah Hagen's number, called her office the next day and said, "I think y'all have made a mistake." And she laughed. And she was like, "No, we didn't make a mistake." I said, because I had heard wind. You know, you get wind when it's maybe coming. Right. But I'm thinking they're going to invite me for the Music Guild morning. Right. You know, every Monday morning is the Music Guild. Exactly. And that's where you normally start out. You just get your feet wet and start there.
And see how you do.
Yeah. And then they're going to determine if you do well enough, then you come back. Right. So for me to be invited to the morning for 3 days straight, I called and said, I think y'all made a mistake. She laughed and said, No. We did not make a mistake, Reverend Sharpe. We knew what we were doing. We believe that God has something for you to say to us. So while Dr. Marcus Cosby and I were on to be the 2020 Hampton preachers, we decided to start praying together every Monday night around 9 or 10 o'clock. So we're praying together. And so January goes, and then here comes February. Then here comes March 2020. And I remember that Monday like it was yesterday. We got on the phone. I said, "Well, Doc, I don't know what this is about this possible virus that's going on, but they're talking about maybe shutting some things down." I said, "Maybe we need to pray that Hampton will be shut down as well, so we don't have to do this." Right. And we were joking. Right. It really happened. Hampton was shut down in 2020, so now we had to sit with the weight of, okay, no Hampton. It was a relief and a weight. Right. Because we were like, well, although we were relieved from this, it was so much going on in the world. It was a horrible time. Then 2021 comes, no, they're not going to do it. They're going to play some old clips from the years past, 2021. And then here comes 2022. Oh, we're having it, but it will be limited. So only 1,500 people can be there. And so we're having it. Well, I had now carried this weight for 2 years. Everybody knows that has preached Hampton, knows there is an unusual, enormous, prodigious, colossal, gargantuan weight that sits on you. You wake up in the middle of the night like, I gotta go preach Hampton in a few weeks or a few months. So imagine that weight being on us for 2 years. So it was heavier. I finally get there. I'm like, Lord, give me energy, give me strength, help my mind. I'm in a PhD program now. I'm pastoring a church, trying to get them through, transitioning back into the building. It was just a lot going on. My grandfather dies May 23rd. Hampton is coming in 2 weeks. The week of his funeral, I get COVID. And I'm trying my best to focus on preaching, but I'm literally in the bed the week before. They give me this little experimental pill. They said, this is gonna lessen your symptoms. It's gonna speed up your recovery. And so up until Thursday before Hampton, I'm about to call them and say, I can't make it. I'm not about to put people at risk. And so the blessing was Saturday night, I test, and my test comes back negative. It's Saturday night. Hampton is remixed in a way because usually morning preacher preaches Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Right. Well, this year, because they abbreviated it, I'm on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Right. Saturday is when I discovered I can even really show up. Right. So going in with that, having to preach through that, luckily God held my lungs up, held my body up. I was so done and exhausted by Wednesday, but the Lord met us there every morning. It was weird. Hampton wasn't as full as it was. A lot of more people were watching online. Right. It was only 1,500 people in the room. Right. And so I did my best. I was the youngest preacher to be invited to be the morning preacher in Hampton history. When the invitation came initially, I was 28. I was 28. I was supposed to preach when I was 29. I didn't preach until I was 31 because of the pandemic, but to be even invited was just, as I told you earlier, I said, I still don't think that I was supposed to be up there, because when you think Hampton, you think the living legends, you think the people that have had some years behind them. So I'm still processing what it means and what it meant to have been invited as the youngest preacher in Hampton history. Wow. I'm still trying to process what that means. So I don't know how I made it through other than the grace of God, some good essential water. And I was fasting. And I would tell anybody, Hampton is not just an academic experience. So you have to have your spirit together. Yes. And I was really, really fasting and praying and asking God to meet me in that pulpit, in that preaching moment. So while I prepared with the books, I called the scholars. I needed the Holy Spirit in a different kind of way.
Well, you did an amazing job, just absolutely amazing. And
thank you.
I think we've been talking about, I think I'm going to share something that I shared to you about being a generational preacher. And I said to you that I thought that God, you have an assignment as a generational preacher, and that I was just privileged to be hopefully a part of your preparation for your assignment. And I think that the age, the comprehensiveness of your gifts, your intellect, the emotive, the intellectual, the hoop, the Niebuhr, just the combination, plus the spirit that you have, the humility that you have, the integrity that you have, all of that radiates through. All of it radiates through. And so while I said to you, I don't want to put pressure on you, but God gives some people the assignment as a generational preacher. And with that assignment comes, a heavy weight and a heavy responsibility, great gifts, open doors. So I don't know what I want to ask you about that more than to affirm that. So tell me, when I say generational preacher, what stirs in you, or what's your sense of that?
Terrified. No, I'm just kidding.
It is terrifying.
It is a weight.
It is a weight.
I've heard people tell me this that I greatly respect, preachers. I've heard people say to me that there are people looking up to me, and what's weird is I'm still looking up to so many people.
Right.
It's really, I don't know the word. I'm still being poured into.
Right.
I'm still being mentored. I'm still a pitcher,
Right.
trying to ease up to fountains and be refreshed and refilled. But at the same time, there are younger preachers walking up to me saying, I've been watching you since I was 9. What? I've been watching you. I've been watching you on YouTube. I watch Fellowship and you helped me grow as a preacher. You've influenced my ministry and I want you to come preach my installation. Right. I'm preaching installations. I'm in my early 30s. Right. I want you to come preach my ordination. So it's a humbling experience. But to me, all I hear is what's gotten me here is being authentic, being myself.
Right.
And so I don't feel the pressure to be anything.
Right.
If I'm going to carry this mantle well, I need to stay grounded.
Yep.
I need to stay centered, and I need to stay authentic. But it's a weight.
I think that there's a part that's still being formed for the assignment. So let me say more, that out of every generation there arises practitioners of the art of black preaching who become models for a generation. And these are people who are imitated, which, part of my work with, or my ministry with people who are models, is to make sure that they're able to leave a method behind. Typically, I use the analogy of a recipe. If grandma dies and grandmama don't leave a recipe,
Yeah, it's gone.
Then kids are trying to figure it out. So when you don't leave a recipe, they'll copy your clothes. They'll copy your clothes, what you wear. They'll try to sound like you. And you have a responsibility, I think, to leave more than that.
Right.
To talk to people about what you're doing or how you're doing. They want to know, how do you do what you do? Mm-hmm. And so you're being imitated, you're being copied. So you told me that there are 10 YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me what you said. So you said.
Well, there's this sermon I preached years ago for a watch night called If Tomorrow Could Talk. And it's about the text with Jehoshaphat. And God tells, or the spirit tells Jehaziel, tomorrow go down and do da 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 da. So I wrote a sermon, If Tomorrow Could Talk. So the whole sermon is, what would tomorrow say to us today? Right. And literally underneath the clip are about 10, probably 15 videos of people copying my sermon, right. Verbatim. Right. Even my stories, personal stories. Like, that wasn't you, that was me. It doesn't even fit. Right. But so people are copying. And I think to this recipe piece, and that's what the program is about too. Right. So the PhD program forces us to say, what is your recipe? Right. What do you do? Right. I can't give it all right now because this would be 2 hours long, but I can tell you that this may sound weird, but therapy is a part of my recipe. Making sure that I'm well, right. Mentally, emotionally. I don't play about mental health, advocacy. Right. I've seen so many preachers get to the pulpit and bleed on people that didn't cut them. Right. I've seen so many preachers mishandle moments where their mother passes or their wife or husband passes, their partner passes, and they get back to the pulpit the next day and preach. It's like, where's the self-care? So there's this commitment to self-care that I have. Simplicity is one of my secrets. I believe Dr. Claiborne Lee said there's profundity in simplicity. Right. So one of my preaching secrets is that I don't have to wow you with long quotes. And I don't have to bring you the whole ocean for you to still benefit from the ingredients of what's in the water of the ocean. Right. So I may bring you a cup full, but be very clear where it came from is deep. Right. I may not be able to bring you the whole depth of where I just came from, but I believe if I give it to you in sizable portions, reasonable portions, you'll be able to take it. Because my goal is not to be impressive, it's to be impactful. And so even my classmate, my sister, Dr. Dominique Robinson, who wrote about the, this using technology in the preaching moment, the I homiletic. One of the pieces is even with Twitter, you have to say it within so many characters. If we're going to be relevant in the next generation, our preaching has to be shorter, has to be more succinct, has to be more organized, has to be more intentional. We have to have brevity as one of the hallmarks of all of our preaching, because people's attention spans literally can't take it. And so one of my secrets is simplicity. Another one is organization. Another one is, I think I told you about the grandma nem flavor. I want everybody to be able to benefit, from the 90-year-old at my church to the teenager. I'm going to have examples, references that are cross-generational, transgenerational in my preaching. And that's why older folks would pack out youth revivals when I used to do them. And the old folk walk up and I'm like, I'm not preaching to you. I came for the youth. I'm here to talk to the youth. But literally their grandmothers and their grandfathers and their parents would pack out youth revivals because they want to hear. Because I wasn't just using references for them. I was also quoting stuff my grandmother would have been able to relate to. And so this transgenerational intentionality in my preaching, I think is something that I think would benefit the next generation as well. And I'm not saying this like I've gotten it together, because I am very much a student and will forever be a student of preaching. But am I in the right vein?
Yeah, you're right in the right river.
Yeah. And authenticity. I wrestled so much when I got to my church with authenticity. One of the most painful indictments ever. And it took me probably 5 to 6 months of talking through it in therapy. This is how bad it cut me. One of my parishioners told me, I don't hear your education in your preaching. And at first, I thought I could swallow what he said. But then I realized that it had cut deeper. The wound was deeper than, it's like you scrape your knee, you really don't know how bad it just got scraped. Oh, it cut me deep. So bad I had to call him back and said, no, I'm in a PhD program. I was one of the youngest preachers to be invited to Hampton. I've gone through a lot of programs. I've been studying preaching since I was 15 years old. What do you mean? Help me understand. I wasn't offended at that time. I could not wrap my mind around what he had said to me. And I said, I know I'm not the best preacher, but you can't hear any of my education in my preaching. He said, it got worse. He said, no, that's not what I meant. I think it's your style. I don't need all the hooping. I don't need all the yelling. I don't need all that. And to me, I associate that with somebody who has not gone to school. When I see that you've gone to Morehouse and you've gone to Yale and Vandy and da-da-da, it doesn't match. I said, the cut became even deeper. You associate preachers who are more emotive and more expressive with being less educated. I said, so it's my style. So if I, just talked a little lower and just said my piece and asked us to stand open doors of church, it would be better for you. Oh yeah, I like that. So now I'm left to heal from the residue of what does it mean to not be enough in a world and in a ministry where others are saying you're more than enough. But there are people still, after all you try to do and become, it's still not enough. At the core of what I want to pass to the next generation is, you better know who you are. And it's what happened with Jesus in the baptism and in the wilderness. That moment is so profound to me when he's being tempted. Turn these stones into bread, jump off the building, da-da-da. It's another temptation that we miss, Doc. It's the temptation to prove yourself, because Satan says to Jesus, if you are the Son of God, that moment right there was the fourth temptation, I argue. If you're the Son of God. The problem is the previous chapter, The heavens just opened. The dove just came down, and God said, you are my beloved son. Right. And the first temptation that preachers are going to have to overcome is the temptation to prove who you are. Wow. When God has already approved you. Right. So when you know that you're already approved, right, you don't have anything to prove. So I had to go back and find a place of peace within myself and realize I'm enough. Right. I may not be enough for you, right, but I'm enough. Right. I'm sorry, my style is what it is, right, but it's me. Right. And my predecessors did it differently. Right. And my successors may do it differently. Right. But the content is still the same. My grandma used to put tuna in I can't believe it, not butter container. You know what I'm talking about? They used to find any container, right, to put anything in. Right. And one day she said, go in and get you some tuna. I couldn't find it. She said, oh, look at that, I can't believe it's not butter container. And I had to tell my church one day, just because the container is different, right, doesn't mean that the content is still not what you need. Wow. So styles are containers. That's right. But that gospel, right, that message, that's the tuna. Right. That's right. And sometimes I can't believe it's not butter.
So tell me how you prepare a sermon, because that's also critical. How do you prepare a sermon?
Well, as a pastor, I've had to learn there's a difference in itinerant preaching and pastoral preaching. Mm-hmm. So pastoral preaching, I'm more series driven. Mm-hmm. That helps me have time with the congregation to build on an idea or walk through a specific text. So I try to go ahead of myself. So last year, I knew what I was preaching pretty much every month, ideally, unless the spirit changed, something happened in culture that took me in a different direction. I'm always looking for inspiration. Everything speaks to me. This chair can speak to me. You know, the screws in this chair I cannot see. I will have a conversation with a screw. And the screw will say to me, it's always the stuff you can't see that's holding it together. Right. Isn't that how life is? Yeah. Some you can't see holding you together. So I'm always looking for inspiration from a simple chair. It could be a bottle of ketchup. And it says shake well before you. Sometimes in life, we have to be shaken so that the fullness and the efficacy of who we are rises to the top and to the best. So, I'm looking for inspiration even through culture. Things that happen on the news and things that happen in our government, tragedies. I'm always looking for, where is God in this? Or is this an illustration to help point us to God? Or is God in the middle of this speaking to us? Right. So I'm always watching everything. I mean, literally, my friends will tell you, I could be in the middle of an amusement park. And I'll be in line. I said, boy, that'll preach. Sharpe, please, do you ever turn it off? I'm like, no, not really. It's always on. I'm always looking. And the best investment that I've made in my life in ministry, preaching ministry, is investing in my library. So when I was at Morehouse, I don't know how I learned this quote from Dr. Sandy F. Ray, but Dr. Ray used to say, every preacher needs a sermon garden, and every preacher needs a sermon gallery. So a lot of my preparation deals with that. The sermon garden that's your own personal notebook. Write those ideas down. I put them in my phone. It could be a quote. It could be an idea. It could be a text. Write it down, because there's no greater pain than having a great idea that you cannot remember. That's right. That's your garden. And you know better than I know some stuff you don't use till years later. Right. But at least you can go back and say, where is that? Yeah. What's that text I needed? And your devotional life is so important. So garden deals with ideas. Garden deals with brainstorming. Garden deals with prayer life, devotional life. My devotional life has been key, because you cannot withdraw from a bank account that you've not made deposits in. That's right. And so I don't like preaching in that scarce season. We all go through it, where it's like you just trying to make up stuff. I'm just trying to find a text to get through Sunday. But it feels so much better when you're preaching from an overflow. Right. And that garden, that sermon garden, and this devotional life, notes, gallery, the books you invest in. Right. That's your library. And so I've been blessed to talk to some great preachers and ask them, which commentary set do you use? Dr. Teresa Fry Brown helped me out. Dr. Philip Pointer has helped me out. my classes have helped me out to invest in the right books. So when I sit down, I'm sitting down with a room full of people, right, even if I'm in the room by myself. Right. And Dr. Fry Brown was my first homiletics professor, and she taught us, don't go to the commentary before you sit down with your own imagination. That's right. So I always sit down with my own thoughts, empty what I see, even try to get an outline, try to get some organization, use my imagination. But I'm not gonna get to that pulpit before I bring some other voices in just to see, is this making sense? Am I in the right place? And then the ideas you get from there, that you're not that you're trying to steal them, it just bolsters and fortifies what your imagination had already told you.
Do you write a manuscript?
I try to do both. I don't want to be stuck in one way. Years ago, I committed to being able to do both. So a few weeks ago, we were preaching together, 7 Last Words. Mm-hmm. That was a manuscript written from beginning to end. Right. A couple times I looked up and just spoke extemporaneously, but that was a manuscript. If you had seen me on that Sunday morning, you would have said, nah, is this the same person? Mm-hmm. It was an outline. Right. And I just preached from that outline. But I want to be able to be ambidextrous, right, if that's the word. I want to be able to do more than one thing. Hampton may require a manuscript. Right. Youth revivals, church anniversaries may require just an outline, or preaching without notes. Right. So sometimes I'm without any notes, right, sometimes I'm with an outline, sometimes I've written either the close or I've just written the intro, right, or sometimes I've written it all. Right. But I want to be able to do it all so I don't get stuck in one way.
So first, you've been very generous with your time, and I'm deeply appreciative. But as we take our turn for our close, I want to do what they used to say in the old church when they used to say, our preacher for the evening is Pastor Reginald Sharpe, and he's going to come in his own way.
His own way.
So I want you to, whatever in your own way, whatever you'd like to say in your own way.
I just want to, I really want to make sure that the preachers listening to me understand how important it is to take care of their mental health. Okay. I have journeyed with depression, and when this program started, I don't know if you remember, but there were 3 days I missed of orientation because I was sick. I was dizzy. It wasn't until at the end of last year that I figured out what happened to me at the end of 2019. That was anxiety. Right. I was becoming a new pastor of fellowship. I was starting this program. Reverend Clay Evans had just died the week before our orientation. I had just learned they were going to put me on program because they need to hear the new future pastor. Right. Pastor Jenkins, my pastor emeritus, my predecessor, was retiring in 2 weeks, and my head was about to explode. Everybody that was watching them said, oh man, you about to be the new pastor. How you feel? How you feel? How you feel? Oh doc, oh man, you just 28 and you about to take over fellowship. You know the ship is it ain't a boat, it's a ship. And what folks didn't know was I was sinking, trying to take over the mantle of being the captain of the ship. People are thinking I'm about to steer the ship, and the weight of all of that was about to take me down. Starting this program, Reverend Evans passing, the founder dies, the previous pastor's retiring, and you about to be in a PhD program with Dr. Frank Thomas. He's gonna get you. He's gonna expose everything that ain't supposed to be there. It was so much, and I didn't realize I was dizzy for 3 straight days. Went to the urgent care. Yeah. Nobody could stop it. Yeah. I was forced to lay down. And he gives new meaning to he maketh me lie down in green pastures. It made me lie down. And I've gotten dizzy earlier this year, a couple times, back to back, about 3 times in a row. Talked to my therapist about it. And I said, I've been having these dizzy spells. I know it's anxiety. She said, well, what's the common denominator? I said, I was at church for 3 of them. She said, well, isn't that telling? Well, we got to do something different. My point is, anxiety is real in ministry.
Yeah.
Depression is real in ministry. And you have to get up to the pulpit and preach about hope, and preach about strength, and preach about the intangible truths of the gospel, even in seasons where you don't feel none of it.
Yeah.
And I want preachers to invest in a therapist, invest in taking sabbaticals, invest in learning how to let some stuff fall. That was the sermon I preached the second day at Hampton. It was Uzziah who tried to steady the Ark of the Covenant, and he died. He died doing a good thing. And we'll never understand all the theological implications of what that was, but he was not supposed to touch it. And we've got to understand that some stuff has to fall. And we have to let it fall because it still will be God's glory, even if it's on the ground. But here we are grabbing and trying to be strong for folks and hold the church together and hold our families together and hold ourselves together, be impressive and make sure that we are up on the social media and get the church website right and make sure we invest in that new LED wall and which new camera we're going to buy and which new outfit are we going to invest in. At some point, you got to let it fall.
Right.
And you have to take care of yourself.
That's right.
Christ died for the church, so we don't have to.
I want to add one thing to that, and it's, very, very brief. I think, and I'll say this to you, I think that we also have to let other people help us.
Yes.
Or make a more team approach. So one of the things that the black church has not learned yet, in white churches, they get to a point, then they hire a teaching pastor to kind of share the load. But we tend to be more solo. We think that as a practical tip. So I keep thinking about this. Well, why? We ain't got to go into it now, but we can talk about it later. Why is it that we don't? They're qualified. I know that they'll steal a church. I know all of that, but it's killing us.
It's killing us.
I used to say all the time, just like LeBron has so many dunks in those legs, so a preacher has only so many sermons in their soul. And when you're preaching 4 times a week, 3 times a week, and I did it.
Yeah.
So I'm talking out of pained experience. Absolutely. And what it draws out of you. We were doing Saturday night, 2 services Sunday. I was in revival every weekend, right? And what does that do to home? What did that do to me? So I appreciate your message, and I think I just want to bless you in the close. I'm going back to this whole generational assignment. You have a generational assignment to bless you in it. You're preparing for it. The mental health pieces, everything that you said to me is the right road. And part of what I mean by generational is, again, these models who do it so very well that they're imitated. And the hardest part to imitate, or the hardest part to express, is integrity, authenticity. Simple things like, if a preacher with 12 members invites me, I come, and then the preacher with 10,000 calls and says, I want you to come. And then we won't go to the 12. I mean, it's the same day, right? We won't say no to the 10,000. We'll because of the exposure, we'll go there. But that person with the 12 members, these are the small things, the small things that build integrity. And I say to preachers all the time, this is not about me talking. I'm usually trying to let my guests talk without me talking.
We need this, Doc.
Is that integrity is built across the life. And when you have integrity, it'll open some doors that you can't open. And when you don't, it'll shut some doors you don't even know you missed. Right?
Wow.
You don't even have any idea that you didn't get that opportunity because it got closed down in the back. So I don't know what I'm saying, if anything. I just want to bless you. And I think what I'm going to pray with you. I think maybe that's the best way to close, is just to pray over you. And I'm just excited. I want to see you win. I'm just excited about your ministry. When I was watching you the other night when we were together, I'm just excited about what God has for you, excited about who you are, your family.
Thank you.
You know, your wife, the ship, and just where God's brought you, your humility. So just let me pray over you. I think that's...
Well, let me say thank you, because you're a gift. And so my generation is better because of some mileage that you've gained ahead of us, and you've cleared some paths for us. So we thank you.
Oh, thank you, man.
And I'm a better student, a better preacher, hopefully, and better professor because of you.
Yes, you are.
Bless you.
You are all of that, baby. I'm proud to. So God, we do thank you now just for the gift that has been stirred. We thank you for the years of preparation, and yet, God, so many years to go. God, I ask you to bless Reggie Sharpe, bless everything his hand touches, bless his family, bless his wife, God. Bless the desires of his heart, and I know, God, that what you have is bigger than what I can see and what he can see and what anybody can see. You have a plan before the world was ordained. We bless him. We receive him. We anoint him. We listen to him. We love him. We teach him. He teaches us. He teaches me. I teach him. We thank you for relationship.
Yes.
We thank you for the years. Thank you for all the people that were not mentioned but had such a role.
Yes.
Thank you for all the preachers that will be influenced. God, we do it all to your glory. That the beauty, that the depth, that the power, the imagination, the history of African American preaching would generate a preaching renaissance in this nation.
Yes.
To revive American Christianity in the 21st century. God, this is one of your generals in the revival. We thank you for him. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. I love you.
I love you too, baby.
Thank you.